Hello, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here this fine Friday. It's an open line Friday, 877-973-7425. If you want to be on the program, we've got breaking news out of the gate that we've got to get to. Big story, big win. The United States Supreme Court has told Donald Trump's Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, she has the right to revoke Biden-era permissions for non-citizens from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, and their temporary stays in the United States of America. The Supreme Court, including Elena Kagan of the left on the Supreme Court, siding with Kristi Noem and the Department of Homeland Security. The application for stay presented to Justice Jackson and by her referred to the court is granted. The April 15th, 2025 order entered by the United States District Court for the District of Massachusetts is stayed pending the disposition of the appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit and disposition of a petition for writ of certiorari. If such a writ is timely sought, such should cert be denied. This stay shall terminate automatically. Now, that's gobbledygook legal language for the fact that the Supreme Court says Donald Trump can begin the deportation process on 500,000 migrants who were part of a Biden-era parole program. The Biden-era parole program allowed them to stay for a time. And what the Supreme Court is making very clear here is that the Trump administration has the authority in the executive branch to do deportations. Now, this goes as well to the impact of the Harvard case, where the judge is saying the president can't actually restrict foreign students to Harvard, and pretty much acknowledge that actually he can, but I'm not going to let him. This isn't going to go well. This is the same, by the way, district court for the District of Massachusetts, same judge. Now, Justices Jackson and Sotomayor, they filed a dissent. And what's notable is that the Justice Jackson dissent essentially says, yes, the president has this power, but he shouldn't have this power. These people have been here so long. As a matter of equity. Even Elena Kagan, that was a bridge too far for Elena Kagan. Elena Kagan recognizes the president has the power for deportations. The president has the power to engage in this regard, and the president of the United States has gotten a big win. Now, the question becomes, what about DACA? Remember, the DACA was the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program that was organized by Barack Obama, and Donald Trump tried to get rid of it, and the Supreme Court said no, except they didn't really say no. One of the things that I have long advised members of the Trump administration and his supporters is if you slow things down and dot the I's and cross the T's, you can get a lot accomplished. Let's go back to the very beginning of the Trump administration. The Donald Trump administration first term banned Muslim immigrants. It went to the Supreme Court, and John Roberts wrote the decision and said, you know what? You can do what you want to do. You just can't do it the way you did it. You can do what you want to do. Essentially, there's a procedure you have to follow. And if you follow the procedure, you as president can do it. And if you don't follow the procedure, you can't do it. And you didn't follow the procedure, so you can't do it. So what did the Trump administration do? They went back. They followed Roberts' decision. They followed the proper procedure. It went back to the U.S. Supreme Court. And guess what happened? John Roberts said, you get the right to do it. John Roberts said they could do it. And they did it. They upheld it. It worked. Then there was the case of the citizenship question in the census. They wanted at the spur of the moment towards the end. The census had been finalized. And the Trump administration said, wait, we want to ask a question about citizenship in the census. They stuck it in. It went to the Supreme Court. John Roberts again said, yes, you're allowed to do this, but there's a procedure you're required to follow. and you didn't follow the procedure. Go follow the procedure and you can do it. By then, they'd run out the clock. They didn't follow the procedure. They rushed it. It fell away. But Roberts both times said, if you follow the procedure outlined by law to do what you want to do, you've got the power to do it. For everybody who bashes Amy Coney Barrett as a progressive now, even though she gave you what you wanted on Roe v. Wade, she gave you what you wanted on the immunity decision, she gave you what you wanted time and time again, but when she doesn't give you what you want, she's a lib, she's a progressive hack, she's terrible. Amy Coney Barrett is a proceduralist. You read Amy Coney Barrett's decisions every single time, just about. Almost every time she has ruled against the Trump administration. If you read it, what does she say? They didn't follow the procedure. If they followed the procedure, if they slowed down and dotted the I's and crossed the T's, she would have sided with them. This now raises the question of DACA, deferred action for childhood arrivals. For everybody, and I see this happening online, if this court is so conservative, why didn't they side with DACA? Why isn't DACA gone? Why can't we get rid of DACA? You can get rid of DACA. I would like to read for you the Supreme Court decision. It was a 5-4 decision. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was still alive. John Roberts sided with Elena Kagan, Sonia Sotomayor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, John Roberts, and who was the fourth one? Or the fifth one in the case. It was a 5-4 decision. John Roberts writing for the majority. Yeah, Breyer was still there. Breyer's the one I'm forgetting. So it was Breyer, Kagan, Ginsburg, Sotomayor, and John Roberts. And John Roberts wrote the decision. And guess what John Roberts said? I quote from the decision. I'm reading from the actual majority opinion for the Supreme Court. The dispute before the court is not whether the Department of Homeland Security may rescind DACA. All parties agree that it may. The dispute is instead primarily about the procedure the agency followed in doing so. The APA, which is a procedural act, sets forth the procedures by which federal agencies are accountable to the public and their actions subject to review of the courts. It requires agencies to engage in reasoned decision-making and directs that agency actions be set aside if they are arbitrary or capricious. Under this narrow standard of review, a court is not to substitute its judgment for that of the agency, but instead to assess only whether the decision was based on a consideration of the relevant factors and whether there has been a clear error in judgment. And you know what John Roberts found in this? Roberts said there was no consideration. That was the problem. The Attorney General of the United States said, in light of a circuit court decision questioning DACA, that they could get rid of the program. So the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security got rid of DACA. There was no hearing, there was no review, there was no procedural review, there was no contemplation. One cabinet secretary tells another cabinet secretary, you're good to go. They implemented it immediately and immediately started. And the court's decision is, whoa. We don't dispute at all that you can get rid of DACA. But you've got to have a review process to get rid of DACA. We can't insert our judgment as to whether or not you did the review process in the way we would like. That's not our role here. Our role is to say, did you do the review process? And you didn't. They literally got rid of it overnight. This gets to the case at Harvard. Kristi Noem decided to ban Harvard from accepting foreign students. The judge in Massachusetts, citing this decision, said, you can't just do that. You've got to give Harvard time, and you've got to review it. You just can't snap your finger. Now, you can say, Erickson, but by God, they were duly elected by the American people. They should be allowed. That's not the way the United States works, folks. Never has been the way the United States works. Look at what Barack Obama did with DACA. They had a series of hearings. They were very public about where they were going to go. They went through the kabuki dance of pretending they were hearing all sides, and then they implemented the regulation. All you got to do, The entirety of American administrative procedural law is do the kabuki dance. It is a foreordained outcome of what you want to have happen, but you must go through the motions of showing people you care. That is how American Republican democracy works at the bureaucratic level. You must go through the motions of showing people you care before you do exactly what you want to do. And that is what John Roberts said about the DACA case. So for all of you Trump supporters who are saying, I mean, the court sided with Obama and left DACA, why is DACA there? Because in John Roberts' words, and I quote, the dispute before the court is not whether Department of Homeland Security may rescind DACA. All parties agree that it may. The dispute is instead about the procedure the agency followed. Follow the procedure. You can do what you want. In this case, the breaking news case today, what has the Supreme Court found? They followed the proper procedure. What the court is saying is that if Joe Biden followed a procedure and implemented something, you cannot bind a future president by the acts of a prior president. You can't do it. If one president issues an executive order, the next president can rescind it. If one president grants immigration parole, the next president can walk it back. All you have to do is give the proper notice under the procedural rules. That's all you have to do. And Donald Trump did that in this case. 500,000 people can now be deported expeditiously from the country, even as the hearing is going on. Why? Because the Supreme Court is pretty much signaling, we know the president has the power to do this. Our entire job was to make sure he checked the right procedural box. They checked the right procedural box, so away they go. 500,000 people get deported. Stop pretending that you're the victim of an out-of-control imperial court system. You're not. They just handed Donald Trump a big win. And every time the conservative majority of the court, including Amy Coney Barrett, has stopped Donald Trump, was to say, you got to slow it down. You got to slow it down. Check the right boxes, follow the right procedure, and you can do whatever you want to do. Donald Trump is out attacking Leonard Leo in the Federalist Society now. The Federalist Society, in fact, Stephen Miller was on CNN a short time ago saying they don't use Federalist Society recommendations for judges anymore. They're fools for not doing that. Amy Coney Barrett, Jen Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch. Y'all love them all. You love Jim Ho at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. These are all Federalist Society guys. You know why he's mad? He's mad because Tim Reif, who is the U.S. Trade Court judge that he appointed, he's blasting the Federalist Society, except Reif was not a Federalist Society judge. In fact, Reif was a Democrat. Did y'all know this? The Court of Trade judge that Trump put there was the chief of staff to the Democrats on the Ways and Means Committee, and it was Federalist Society members who advised him not to put the guy on the court. And Trump did not listen to the Federalist Society. He put the guy on the court, and guess what? That guy ruled against Trump on trade yesterday. He wasn't a Federalist Society judge. He wasn't a Federalist Society member. He was the ranking staffer for the Democrats. You're really going to attack Leonard Leo? Let me tell you what Leonard Leo did. Leonard Leo and the Federalist Society gave you a 6-3 conservative majority on the Supreme Court, where Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts gave you the immunity you needed to cancel the prosecutions against you. Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts gave you the power to deport 500,000 illegal immigrants. And John Roberts, if you bothered reading the DACA decision, gave you the power to get rid of DACA if you just followed the procedure. You people are not victims. You're just not following the procedures. You're rushing into things. You got to slow it down, and you're going to be able to get so much of what you want if you just slow it down. The Supreme Court said, again, I read from you, John Roberts saying it's not about whether you can or cannot get rid of DACA. Everyone agrees you can. You just got to follow the procedure. So, Mr. President, why aren't you getting rid of DACA now? That's your next big thing. That's what you promised. Get rid of DACA. The Supreme Court said you can. And today, in a 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court said you can deport 500,000 people expeditiously because you as president are allowed to undo the rulings of the Biden administration. That very court, made up of Federalist Society members you're now attacking, just gave you one of the biggest wins of your administration so far. Maybe rethink whether or not they're there to stymie you Instead, follow the procedure